into principles across design. So today we're going to go across 6 different areas in particular. So the first one, we're going to start with what is the principles of UX and UI, why are they important? We'll go through some industry examples of Spotify, and then we'll go through a bit of a case study of how we use them at Pridebook and applied them to certain feature, so quite hands-on. And then we'll just finish off today with a bit of Q&A and a little bit more detail on some of the courses that we offer. So what are the important principles in design? So around this Venn diagram, there's 3 core areas. So one is UX, one is UI, and one is behavioral psychology. And these are the ones that we talk to when building products out for users and businesses. And experience principles are sit within the heart of those, which is really interesting. And if you're in a business that doesn't have any, then there's a great opportunity for you to help lead, build those out. And if you do have them and they're not being maybe used the best way, hopefully this will help give you some practical skills and guidance on how you can improve how they're applied to build a better product. So just across those 3 areas, again, for those varying probably level of experience on this call, but when we talk about UX psychology, that's things around cognitive load. So how much information can someone process at one time to complete a task? There's things around mental models, so how users understand certain workflows and have a set expectation. So an example is we're all used to doing shopping online. We're all used to seeing the basket in the top right-hand corner. If we just suddenly decided to move that to the bottom left-hand corner and change the icon and not let you see a summary, you're completely breaking the mental model that a user has, and therefore you probably lead to an unsuccessful outcome. So areas like that, social proofing. So that's an example of there's 2 people viewing this product at the same time as you. It's that social reassurance that helps, again, you make a decision faster, ideally. Then we have our core UX principles. This is around things like simplicity, usability, feedback, accessibility. And then we have our design, UI, visual principles, which are a little bit more around things like contrast, color, typography, balance, more the graphical side of things. So they all sit in the experience principles bucket, as I just talked to. This diagram on the right-hand side is an example of how a lot of businesses are set up today. So everyone has normally some company objectives, and then maybe have some more strategic objectives in certain teams. So you might work in a growth team, you might work in a retention team, you might work on the B2B side or B2C side. You'll normally have some tone of voice guidelines. So what's the copy you write and how should it be used? You have some brand guidelines, and then you'll have some design system documentation that you'll follow that helps you build out your product. But experience principles are a big part of what goes into your company sort of your mission and your roadmap. And if it's not already, again, in the kind of company you're working in, it's a great opportunity to help drive quality of design, consistency, and alignment across a lot of teams. So what are experience design principles? So they essentially are principles that help align a product experience and users' needs, expectations, and values. So they should really help anchor your concepts and ideas, and you should be thinking them alongside those standard general UX, UI, behavioral psychology rules. And when are they used? So this is the double diamond. So this is the standard format that designers go through, from the challenge, the problem they're trying to solve, to the final thing they're handing off to engineers. And the different points at when you'd apply these principles and strategic applications and guidelines. So, for example, if you take Airbnb, their vision statement is create a world where anyone can belong anywhere. So that would be right at the start of the diamond. There's the mission. You'd apply your strategic principles if you have them. Maybe some objectives around revenue or growing customer base are very standard ones these days. Then as you start to kind of come up with discovery and some ideas, that's when you start applying your experience principles, and we'll go through some very shortly in that conceptual stage. And then as you kind of start to refine those and get feedback from the team, then you'll look to apply your brand guidelines and your tone of voice. So those things that I mentioned slightly earlier, that's when you apply them into that part of the design process. So here's an example of a project and a brief and how you could apply your principles at different stages. So the project brief is, let's say you want to build new engagement with a feature to help increase your day 1 to 7 retention. So this is a very standard brief that's probably across many different leading companies right now. We look at it at Bridebook. So yeah, how can we keep our users stickier essentially? Once they sign up, how can we keep them around to come back for their next session? So normally do some user research to find out how you might design this feature. You do some competitor analysis. You might look at a UX audit of what currently exists. You might look at some data around people, how they're behaving. The next stage would be for you to come up with some designs as a designer. At that stage, you would then maybe do some user testing to get some validation. You start getting feedback from stakeholders, and then you get team feedback from your engineers, your PMs, and other designers. What can happen at this point is probably every designer's worst nightmare is you get a lot of feedback from stakeholders that don't know the best design, let's say, principles. You get a lot of feedback from your team. You're doing a lot of iterations. You're spending a lot of time communicating the why behind your designs. And there's a lot of subjective feedback that, again, you're trying to deal with and manage, and it's taking you a lot of time to go back and forth and get to the best, I guess, design feature and flow for you. So when you haven't got principles aligned to back you up, this is something that can happen and frustrate you as a designer. How that can change when you do have principles set up is the feedback cycle should be shorter and there should be less of them. So if you've got them to back up your design, that your stakeholders will have far less questions when they're grounded in your experience principles. And then the same with your team, everyone will be way more aligned and you should be able to deliver your work quicker. So that's the be all and the end all there, really. So what are the benefits there to bring your team and stakeholders aligned early on, get them on the same page? Because there's nothing worse than having a stakeholder that just says no to your designs and asks you to change things that you know that just aren't right. And then the second one's around just pushing back on subjective feedback. So I think that you should change that button color to this. I think you should add more information here. That's not backed up in any user testing, any sort of mental models from users or any behavioral psychology. An example here is a stakeholder saying, why can't we add more videos? Why can't we add more information? As a designer, you might say back to that because we want to keep the experience simple and seamless. So that is the experience principle, to reduce the cognitive load per interaction and to reduce the overall bounce rate. So that's just one example. And the last benefit is it really empowers designers. So it helps designers create their best work, helps them be more efficient, spend less time kind of talking through the obvious UX rationale behind your ideas. And now we're going to kind of start to bring those to life. So that's a little bit about the why and I guess the power of what they can do and when to use them. We're going to go into a little bit of detail around Spotify, and Airbnb and principles that they have in place today. So Spotify have 3 principles, and hopefully everyone's aware of Spotify. I use it religiously every day, probably far too much to listen to music and podcasts. Their first principle is around being relevant. So this is really important for them to understand the type of people, the cultures they're from, the language they're speaking. How can they start to personalize that information for them to be powerful and valuable? So all of those points is what you'd consider in that principle of being relevant. So every screen you design, how can you make this as relevant as possible to that user that's looking at that screen or that feature, that flow? The next one is around being human. So how can you, again, bring that emotional side forward? How can you kind of bring that on the right hand side here, you've got a feature they have to create their own emoji for their kids feature or account, which again is giving that kind of sunk cost effect. So the more you customize a product, the more invested you are in it, and the more likely you are to return, which has been proven many times in many studies. So yeah, being human, speaking their language, being conversational. This is what the human principle is for Spotify. And the last one is about being unified. So the goal here is if you see any collateral around marketing campaign or any screen or any feature, you know that's related to Spotify. And that can be done in many ways. That's through colors, that's through typography, that's through music, that's through motion. That's just through the storytelling that you're going to create through all these different touch points. So They want to make sure everything's working together in the right, clean way to make that overall experience unified. So this is an example of them applying to them in real projects. So if we just take relevant as one example, an idea that they have to make content more relevant is to have user-generated content within Spotify, which is obviously a big basis of their app and podcasting and music and then so. So this is kind of a quick example of how you can apply ideas to certain features to make them more relevant. And when you get sort of into those features. We've got Airbnb design principles next. So their current ones are around being unified. So how can you make sure that it contributes to system at scale and making sure it's consistent? How can you making sure that you're being truly universal? Again, a very global product, international, many different languages, different cultures, different regions, and making sure everyone has the accessibility for it. So any disabilities, any access points, you should always be considering those. How can you make it iconic? So how is it memorable? How is it shareable? How's it going to be talked about to people when they're talking with their friends? How are you going to create that viral effect? And the last one's around being conversational. So this probably leads a little bit on the tone of voice guidelines. So how can you speak their language, making sure all the content's easy to understand, communicating easily, and letting the users self-serve as much as possible without needing FAQs and other feedback. So there's two quick examples of leading businesses and their principles. I think they're pretty good examples, but we're going to go through Bridebooks and I'm going to tell you why I think Bridebooks are slightly more, let me say, detailed and a bit more practical in how to apply them to certain design features. So I'll give you a bit more context on Bridebooks. So this is a wedding marketplace that essentially, if you're getting married, you can search for venues, you can search for musicians, suppliers, any caterers to buy your wedding dress on the app. It's a marketplace in that sense. And you can set up your planning, your budgeting, and your checklist and everything like that on the app. This is used by millions of people worldwide right now. And that's essentially our marketplace and what we're building our principles around. So as a group and at Bridebook, we went through the current process, which you could apply in your own workplaces. Also, just to say, if you're not currently working in a business, you can probably create your own experience principles for yourself as a designer, which is a really interesting exercise to do. So how, when you design new features, how do you think about them? What's your level of design thinking? So if you're someone that's not in a current role, you can also do that exercise if you haven't got a team to do it with. So we went through some ideation, we did some mirror boarding, we put some themes together around what are the principles that we want people to know about our product, what are the feelings we want them to feel, what's the kind of the general design guidelines that go with those. That helped us create some ideas, we refined those, we got some feedback, and we kind of shared them around the business to get some more iteration and some more refinement. So this was our first start. So it might look very messy, which is the absolute goal here. So putting down things around trust. So we know that in the wedding industry that it's a very special day, it only happens once normally in people's lifetime. There's a lot of money involved. They want to trust the information we're giving them. They want to be guided. If you're looking down bottom right, they want to be supported. Again, it's something they've done doing for probably the first time. So they really want to be trusted by us to give them the right information, getting the right price, the best deal for them. And then there's other things on here around celebrating moments, being inclusive, being simplest as possible. So they're all things that we considered when we started out our principles project. And these are our final four we created. So always guiding, pushing boundaries, simple and seamless, and sparking delight. And I'll go through them one by one and why we picked these essentially. So our first one, always guiding, is around being that supportive. We call ourselves the older cousin, so we want to be giving them advice, but it's useful advice, it's on trend. We're also the experts. We want to reassure them, want to be empathetic at the same time. So all of those kind of factors we want to add into this principle. Normally when you create these, you have a statement that you'll have across the principle. So ours is here we are there to help educate, reassure, and guide our users every step of the way. We share our expertise to help users make informed choices throughout all their journeys. And then the 4 bullet points underneath are completely dependent on the triggers that you want to push when you're designing. So these are all prompts. So if you've designed one screen, let's say a home screen for an app, you would challenge that by saying, how can you build further trust and reassurance in this screen? How can you surface more insights at the right time? How can you build more confidence? How can you be more transparent? So this should act as a checklist when you're designing your features to making sure you're really guiding them as much as possible. So this is the kind of practical way to use these principles. And this could be in a design team, this could be in a marketing team, this could also be in a product team. They all have their uses to using this kind of checklist criteria. The next one's around pushing boundaries. So this one is around kind of staying innovative, ahead of trends. We are very aware that the different generations search in different ways, and how Gen Z is very kind of TikTok heavy, Instagram heavy with how they want to search for inspiration versus different generations. So we always got to stay very aware of that and move with the times. We want to be bold in our thinking and being the initiator to the market leader, and that's what this one's for. So yeah, how can we be ambitious and impactful in the way that we design and push the boundaries, not just be the first, but be way before the first in the industry to create new features. And we have simple and seamless. So this is probably a designer's dream to have this in their principles. So that simplicity UX principle of always less is more, how we can make it more unified, how we can make experiences more effortless. And then the seamless part of this is around how we can make it more connected and moving from journey to journey. If it's from onboarding to your home screen, to your email campaigns you're receiving, to your notifications, how can you make all those different journeys feel connected and not overwhelming for the user and as helpful as possible? So we want to ensure that all users provide clarity and focus throughout our product and create intuitive and interconnected experience. So that's our principle number 3. Our last one is by far the most enjoyable and most exciting, and especially being around weddings, we love to spark delight. So yeah, where can we add that extra 5-10% to the designs to bring joy, to bring that fun, to even bring some humor, celebrate those milestones? Planning a wedding, as an example, can take up to 18 months. So it's a long old journey to go through that, and it can be a lot of pressure at times. So where can we kind of celebrate those small wins with our users, and also with their partner and friends and family? So this is again something that's maybe normally kind of cut from design teams. If we're talking about an industry, when you create a feature, that's normally the last 5 or 10%, those feedback screens, those celebration screens, animations, illustrations, they normally don't make it into the MVP, let's say, so the minimum viable product. And it's really important as designers to push that as much as possible to get that final 5%, because it does make a difference to the user's experience, making it more shareable, making it more sticky. So always, I would say a principle around spark, delight, and joy is very useful to helping you get those across the line. So there are 4 principles that we created as a team, and then we brought them to life through a series of artifacts. So again, if you're thinking about doing this in your current team, if you haven't got anything set up, you should definitely look to have it set up a session, be the one to initiate that. That will reflect very positively on yourself. So these are set up in our business at the back of our office. Everyone sees them when they walk in. They're talked about on a weekly basis. And that's the real importance of these principles. They're not just created for your team and your designers. They should be for everyone to refer to, everyone to think by as a kind of mindset of how they can create all those different touch points across customer service, marketing, data, operations, across these experience principles. We also created some Slack stickers, so when people are responding to the comments, they can tag their principle, and then we've got these Figma cards that we can paste against our designs and kind of go through that checklist. So they're just other ways that you can help bring them to life. The worst case scenario is that you create principles that aren't used, aren't talked about, and never looked at. So you really need to push them and get them used across the business, and things like these artifacts are a really useful way to do that. You don't want them just talked through by the management team. You want the whole teams to be using these principles in week-to-week conversations. And that's what we're doing right now. They've been very helpful in pushing the UX forward and pushing back against stakeholders and getting a great product outcome. All right, now to the fun bit. So we're going to go through a bit of a practical application of these principles. So I'm going to take you through a real case study that we did at Brightbook and take you through step by step, and you'll have a chance to actually give some answers and thoughts on how you can improve this feature. So the context is that from our research, we found that the Gen Z audience prefers to consume their content in a way more immersive way. So if they're looking to get married, they'll go on Instagram, they'll go on stories, they'll go on TikTok, YouTube Shorts to get inspiration around the wedding venues, the style, and everything in between. So the design brief here is that we believe by building a more immersive search experience, it will help to lead to a more increased engaged audience, and then overall more searching. That will lead to overall more inquiries, so more messages sent to our venues. So that's our hypothesis, which is basically what we believe to be true, is that we can improve the user experience by and also increase favoriting and sending inquiries by improving this design. And we'll do this by updating the search area you can see on the right-hand side. The design on the right is what it looks like today. Design on the left is adding a new view that's very image heavy and immersive, because we believe that will lead to higher amount of people interacting with the profiles and higher amount of people sending inquiries. So yeah, this is how it works today in Brightbook, that you tap on this profile and it'll show you more information about their price. It'll show you reviews, testimonials, things about the catering they do at the wedding venue, and everything in between. So the user journey, as I just touched on, was, let's say they download the app, they tap search, they can change the filter in the search in the top right to a different style of view, so gallery to list or list to gallery. They can swipe through these venues, so top to bottom or left to right. They can look at images or move down to the next venue. They can then favorite and send an inquiry, or they can tap on that image and it'll go straight into a profile. So that's the kind of touch points of what a user would go through. So I'm going to give you an example of how we applied our first principle to this design on the left and how it helps us improve the UX. So the one on the left is one of the first designs that were created, and it definitely was not the final feature. So if we wanted to apply this always guiding principle to build further trust, to surface more insight, to be more transparent, some ways that we can do that is, let's just say once they've pressed save, we add a snack bar at the top. So that can show for let's say a 5-second limit. And if they tap that, they can go to all their saved favorites, because the initial design didn't have a way for them to shortcut to their favorites area in the app. So that's one improvement to help them guide them to that area. The second one is at the bottom there, you can see some tags. So you can see they've got the area in Italy, you've got a guest count and a budget range. So that's again information that you didn't see on the design on the left, but on the right, we've improved that. So a user can make more of an informed decision at this point, and therefore hopefully lead to a higher amount of favoriting and a higher amount of inquiry. So that's 2 improvements just made from applying that one principle there. We'll go through one more, and I'll give you guys opportunities to answer and give your thoughts on the answers for the next 2 as well. So how can we push boundaries and be more innovative at this point? So 2 ways we could do this with this design is, one, we could automate how we change between the images. So let's just say users aren't understanding how you could scroll left to right to see more images. So we could add an automated scroll left to right to give that kind of visual affordance. That's one way, or we could add some cool motion and animation loops as they do that. The second thing we can do more from a technical standpoint is personalize their feed, so what they're seeing based on the venues they're interacting or looking at for longer periods. So if we see that a user is spending more than 5 seconds viewing a certain type of venue, then we'll then personalize the rest of their feed to give them more venues like that. So that'll be built into basically the machine learning model. And that's a way that, more from an engineering perspective, how we can push boundaries on this project. Cool. I can see someone's added a few questions into the chat. We'll get to those in the Q&A bit, Stefan, there, no worries. So next one, I'll let you guys participate. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you could make this design more simple and seamless. So feel free to put anything in the chat of how you'd make that design on the left more simple and seamless. And no answer is a wrong answer. So feel free to type anything in the chat. So how could you elevate the essential information? How could you maybe challenge what's there? Does everything need to be shown? Does anyone got any ideas before I go and show you the next screen? If not, I can go through. Oh, there's a few there. So the filter doesn't need to be always on, Stefan said. And Callum said, could perhaps allow them to hide, show the filters bar. Great suggestion. Play around with 3 and send messages. Nice. Yeah, so these are both great shouts and ones that are actually included here. So first part is we don't need that full background at the top. It's kind of obscuring the view. Let's only elevate the essential there. So let's group the filters into one button on action. Let's add a search. Let's add just a single way to change between the list and the gallery, and then just have the back. And that gives a lot more of an immersive feel to when you're looking through these profiles, just like TikTok. The second part is making this full screen. So the other side on the left, you sort of saw 2/3 of a venue, but you can see one underneath. This one is now full screen. It's fully immersive. It shows off the imagery of the venue and again builds a better user experience. So great suggestions there, guys. Last one, this one might be the easiest to come up with some ideas. So how could you spark delight onto this feature? So how can you make this more memorable? How can you make it more engaging? How can you make someone want to come back to this again for another search experience? So has anyone got any ideas on how we might do that? Think about any apps that you use today. What makes them, say, addictive? Why do you come back to them again? So animation on the fave button. So that's a great shout. Despite its platform with high engagement animation when you like it, have a way for people to see examples of other people's weddings at the venue through showing videos and photos. Yeah, again, great suggestions. Added interaction, feedbacks, animations. Yeah, so you're all kind of on the money there for what we ended up implementing. So 2 things here. So one is around using haptic feedback. So actually giving a vibration on the device every time they favorite or send an inquiry. So that's just a small delighter. And then the other one is, yeah, confetti animation every time they favorite something, which changes the different style each time they do it. So there's a bit of a variable reward there, which hopefully makes them coming back for more. So yeah, great suggestions there, guys. So that's it for today on principles for design. Hopefully that was interesting, gave you a bit of context there. Just going to spend the last couple of minutes on going through some other kind of areas we focus on at Crafted, around like what areas where you can grow your skills and things that we can help you with. So if these are anything challenges that you're facing, that we hear a lot from our students in the industry. So if you're unclear, maybe your current learning path in design, if you're not sure about which kind of boot camp to go for next or what timeline it is to get into your next role, we do hear that a lot, and we go through that in our courses. If you're looking for a career change, so you're moving from marketing, let's say, or an engineering role, you want to go into the design, again, that's something that we hear a lot, and design roles have a very strong salaries, and they're very secure roles currently right now for the right businesses. And then maybe if you're even struggling to land your next design role, if you're not getting interviews when you think like you should be, and you're maybe falling behind at interview stages, again, we can help out with career coaching there. So we run a variety of courses and workshops at Crafted. So depending on if you have, let's say, less than a year's experience, we would suggest our foundation course, which is a couple of weeks. If you have less than 3 years experience, the UX Academy course is probably one for you, and so on. Our courses, again, are very sort of case study rich. We apply our frameworks, but we give always case study examples, so you can hit the ground running when you go into a role, which is very different to other boot camps that are very theory heavy. And then if you're someone that's maybe already in a design role, maybe midweight, and looking to go into more senior leadership positions, we run some workshops for 1 and day workshops. And these are around building more strategic skills. So things like product strategy, things like road mapping, monetization models, problem space framing, and building product vision. So these are all things that will help you get those leadership and senior roles if you build that kind of foundational knowledge. So with all these courses, you can have a look at our website. I posted in the chat, and I'll post on the link after. But they're live sessions a couple of times a week with a design leader. You'll get lifetime access to your resources. You'll get a certificate, which is certified on LinkedIn, and then you'll get access to all kind of future community member content from our newsletter, and you'll get some additional access to events that we'll run throughout the year. And then the last bit we do is career coaching. So this is something that we've offered and we see a lot of interest in right now. And if you're someone that is maybe not sure on what's in your portfolio, if you're looking for a role, if you're struggling to land those interviews, or need help with your CV or your stages, we offer kind of a 3-part series here. So looking at your personal profile, what are your career goals, help your CV and your profile align with that, of what industry and employees are looking for. And then we'll have a portfolio strategy instructor session. So we have our own templates that we can share with you to set up your case studies in a clear way that a design and hiring managers are looking for. And then we can help you prepare for future interview sessions and your job search. And again, helping you get stand out in your profile, help you be found under smart searches by recruiters and things like that. So this has been created from feedback from many hiring managers and designers and recruiters to kind of give you the best standing to find the best role for you. And lastly, if you want to sign up to our community, so yeah, we share some weekly design tips, upcoming events, courses, webinars. Feel free to sign up and we'll add you to the list. So I'll just pop that link again in the chat if you're interested. There you go. And today, that's the end for today's session. So we have some time for some Q&A. If anyone wants to pop in any questions into the chat, I can go through those for the next kind of 5-10 minutes. I can also start with saying the question that we normally get a lot on this topic is how long do they kind of take to create those principles? And yeah, I guess like what's the biggest challenge to creating them in businesses? So what I would say to that is, I think if you kick off the project tomorrow with your team, you can probably do it in about 4 weeks. You want to really make sure you get enough feedback from everyone in the business. So make sure everyone feels involved, everyone from the leadership to the teams across the business. Even if you're a small business, make it very collaborative. And then to make sure that they are kind of put in place and used. Again, those artifacts are really important. So those posters, stickers, Figma cards, you should also be the driver of those and the conversations you're having. Should anchor your feedback to stakeholders with your principles. So if you're ever kind of pushing back on maybe some feedback they're giving you, you'd say that it doesn't align with our experience principles because of X, Y, Z. And the more you use, the more I understand, and hopefully it'll help elevate the level of design. So Callum's asked a question, so would you ever come across a scenario where your design principles needed a change? If so, is there something that happens rarely? Yeah, really interesting question. So the businesses I've worked at, I've never seen them be changed. I think they have been refreshed. So let's just say I've seen some businesses create too many. So I'd always advise 4 as a maximum. Otherwise, there can be a bit of overlap and they just kind of lose their impact. So 4 is a maximum I would advise. As I guess a company grows, sometimes maybe from a startup to a more established company, you might have an additional value that you might want to add, something around scalability, for example, or being unified. That's much more meaningful later on in that growth stage than when you started. So I think it does depend on, as the company grows, you can review them, but they should be something that you set up and should stay in place for definitely a number of years before that happens. But at the same time, it should be getting feedback every year or so on them, how they're working. In design, everything should be iterative. So I'm definitely a fan of not keeping things fixed. If they're not working for the team, they're not being used, then review them and iterate on them, simplify them, improve them, is what would be my advice. Eugenie just asked a question, so thanks for your presentation, for the initial research. Where does one find behavioral data? What are the best practices around that? So if you're talking around behavioral data, there's a couple of things in there. So if it's around how people are using the product, so observing how they're moving around, so things like heat maps, understanding where they're clicking, understanding where they're bouncing, then you can use tools like Hotjar, Full Story. There's many out there that provide that kind of insight. There's normally a cost, but there's normally always a free plan. If you're talking around more behavioral, so behavioral psychology, there's a list of resources that we go through at Crafted, and I can share a few on our newsletter. Again, of what kind of the background of why people make decisions the way they do, and that can help you with your design suggestions as well. So hopefully that helps. Can start another question. So how would you go about gathering feedback as if the principles are working? Okay. So yeah, the best way I think with anything is to get wide feedback. So I'd normally just run a survey. It can be anonymous, it can be named. It's up to the people that fill it out. They can normally. It's great if you have some sort of score, some sort of quant score on when you say, so how well do you think the principles are working? Score 1 to 10, and then you can take an average and make a decision. Let's just say if you're under 8 out of 10, then you might want to make some iterations. If it's over, then that's a pretty good score. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is actually just to have just collaboration sessions and workshops on them. Ask how people are using them today, give some examples, see if they're working, see if there's any improvements you can make in a more kind of practical way. So that's kind of the two ways I'd advise. If there's ones that exist today that you don't think are working, then I'd speak to if you're a manager, if you're a manager yourself, then you could go for either of those options. No worries, cool. All right, well, I think that's all the questions for now.